Helps both large corporations and small businesses with insurance, risk management, and employee benefits using the same values they've held true for over 30 years: knowledge, vision, accountability, and service. More information is at bmbinc.com.
Hello, I'm Marcia Kavanaugh. Thanks so much for joining us. We'll mention the name Harvey locally, and people associate it with a West Bank community and tunnel. After this week, the name will forever be associated with an East Texas flood. We'll look tonight at the impact of the disaster, both in the Houston area and locally, and at the parallels with Hurricane Katrina. We'll also assess the performance of political leaders and look at the cultural and economic links between Houston and New Orleans. Elsewhere, our Future Watch segment checks in on local road construction projects, and we inquire about the progress of next year's tricentennial celebration. And Tigers at home in the Dome. On the road for us are tonight's Informed Sources. Errol Laborde, producer of Informed Sources. Tyler Bridges, reporter, The New Orleans Advocate. Don Ostrom, Channel 12's Future Watch reporter. And Dave Cohen, news director at WWL Radio. We go to Dave first, and this week we observed the 12th anniversary of Katrina, and boy, we really had a stark reminder of that terrible situation with what's going on in Houston. It's just unbelievable.
Yeah, we've talked a lot over the years that there are benchmark anniversaries, and then we looked forward to getting through the 10th because we thought, well, after the 10th, maybe it's not as poignant, it's not as heart-wrenching, it's not as difficult to observe the anniversary. But this 12th anniversary took on so much more of that heartfelt difficulty because we're watching what's happening in Houston with Harvey and seeing so many parallels and so many stark reminders of what New Orleanians and folks along the Louisiana-Mississippi Gulf Coast went through 12 years ago. When I saw the convention center in downtown Houston overflowing with people, and there weren't cots, there wasn't food, there wasn't water, and people were complaining that nobody was prepared for this. I thought we learned that lesson in Katrina, and that there would be a designated place where they'd already have the food and water and cots and basic necessities. But they weren't there. I remembered all the people who decided they would stay behind and had to be rescued by boat, by high water vehicle, by helicopter in Katrina. Across Southeast Texas, boats, high water vehicles, helicopters. And in both cases, we knew it was coming. There was no secret that there was going to be widespread, devastating flooding in Southeast Texas. They were saying 30, 40, 50 inches of rain before Harvey even became a major hurricane, when it was still in the Gulf.
Which was really hard to believe. 50 inches of rain, how could you mean that, But
and maybe that was part of the problem. Maybe people thought, nah, it's a bunch of baloney.
I think part of the problem, too, is you don't know exactly where. Will that convention center be okay? Where do you stage the resources? And what if you get it wrong and have all those resources go to waste? I think it's easy to sit back and judge. It's really hard to, in the moment, get it right.
Well, the decision was made not to evacuate, too. I mean, there's been a lot of criticism in some circles about that.
Well, you think back to Houston right after we went through Katrina, when Rita came in, and many New Orleanians were there for it. They attempted to evacuate 6 million people from Houston for Rita. 100 plus died.
Because they sat on the highway.
Because the roads were so packed, 24, 48 hours, people just sat. They ran out of gas, it was hot. And so since then, they've not tried to evacuate Houston. They didn't have contraflow at the time, and many have said that's what they need. They need a more robust plan that includes contraflow and maybe targeted evacuations. When you saw the pictures hit social media of elderly nursing home residents with water up to their waist or chest, sitting in wheelchairs in the floodwater. Waiting. All you could think of was that poor nursing home down in St. Bernard Parish where the people died. In this case, thank God we have social media.
I think that's the biggest difference, storm to storm, is social media and the ability to text and tweet and do all those things to get help to exactly the right places. Most of us remember receiving that first bleep on our phone during Katrina going, what is that?
Yeah,
and it was, we figured out how to text then.
Before that, it was just our kids that were texting.
Right, we couldn't get an email on our phone. We didn't have the ability to post a picture or say, I'm on this rooftop. That's all changed.
But with all that ability, we still had people who could look and see what the prediction was on their phones, see what the forecast was, see that there was going to be 30, 40, 50 inches of rain in their area. And some did evacuate. I know people who did pack up, get out, and say, let's not risk it, let's not stay. But as we know, tens of thousands did stay throughout southeast Texas and have to be rescued.
And of course, this was an incredible rainfall event. I mean, just a phenomenal rainfall event. Unlike what happened here during Katrina with the failure of the levees, and the lake basically came on top of the city of New Orleans. But looking at this, and I know that there's going to be a lot of study about it, but was there a way to even tell what areas of Houston would be impacted by this heavy rain?
No, of course. The slosh models, as they call them, try to determine when there's X amount of rainfall, where the water will go, if levees break, where the water will go. It's an imperfect science, particularly since this was so unprecedented. There's never been a storm that's dropped 50 inches of rain before that came in. You know, we always worry in New Orleans about either a Category 4 or Category 5 or a slow-moving Category 1 or tropical storm. They got both in Texas. It came in as a 4, barely, but it came in as a 4, and then it stayed. And it meandered, and it barely moved for day after day after day. And so it is unprecedented. It is history-making. Nothing like this has ever happened before. But to the Hurricane Center's credit, they got it right. They said this was going to happen. Now, did they get exact track of the center, of the eye, of where it was going to go? No, and it kept changing. Once it was Oklahoma, then it was New Orleans, then it was somewhere in between. And so but the rainfall they got. They said it was going to happen, and it did.
You know, we've been hearing so much about our drainage system with the pumps, which is really fairly unique. Very few cities have that. And now we've been hearing about analysis of Houston's, which is really more of a series of canals kind of channeling out. And people are starting to question that as being outdated and muddy old canals. And so once again, we're hearing a revived debate about the drainage systems.
Yeah, the dams and reservoirs in Texas were overwhelmed. They ended up having to release the water out of them because it was too much. And they had to protect downtown Houston, so other communities got the water. So there's going to be a lot of debate, a lot of discussion. But the bottom line is, a major hurricane, a rainmaker like this, you're talking about hundreds of billions of dollars if you want to make a system that can protect the city against that.
Also, you know, there's the issue of development, too. There's been so much development in Houston, and I would guess the drainage system has not kept up with the development, because that means concrete.
There are requirements.
No grass to absorb the water.
There are requirements on new construction that there be water displacement plans. You have to put the drainage underneath the concrete. You have to have a place to hold a certain amount. But no, it doesn't double for all the grasslands that they lost in Texas.
Right.
Tens and tens of thousands of acres that have been built since Tropical Storm Allison, which was kind of the storm of record for causing flooding over there.
Well, and that's a topic that Don talked about on the show a couple weeks ago, of what New Orleans is starting to do, and
Live
probably
with water. Figure
To
it
live
out.
with the
Although
water.
I heard today about a person in Houston who had built up 10 feet, built the flood-proof house that got water. So, I mean, you can't build for this kind of scenario. I don't think you can. I don't think you can protect a city from it. You just have to hope that it doesn't happen again.
You want to hope it's a once-in-a-lifetime thing, a
It's
once-in-a-historic thing.
It's an 800-year storm is what they're calling it.
So
You
that
hope
means
you
there's
get
a
another 800 years before you get another
But
one.
that means there's a 1 in 800 chance of it happening any given year.
Right.
And you know, if you believe the climate change experts, we're going to see more like this.
So that means communities need to just design with more resiliency in mind in order to sustain. I mean, that because of what's happening now in our climate.
Well, and people individually have to better prepare, and governments have to better prepare to deal with what Mother Nature is going to bring, and have a plan on how to deal with that.
Well, with
And the
just
people
this-
have to be willing to pay for it, too.
True.
good question.
Yes.
Good question.
And that sort of leads us to, well, personally, there has been a lot of, individuals who've gone over there to help. Even from Louisiana, the Cajun Navy, has gone to rescue people. And then all other, resources, too, have been marshaled to rescue people. Let's talk about what our local and also state political leaders have done to look at this situation and try to do something about it.
Sure. Well, we had flooding here on August 5th, and remember, Mitch Landrieu, the mayor, was in Aspen, and was much criticized for being gone. And then it turned out that his staff gave incorrect information that when they said all the pumps were working. And so he has had almost a press conference a day since then. First, it was dealing with, all right, what are we doing about the turbines that went out, the pumps that weren't working, the catch basins that are clogged. And then it turned into, all right, here's how we're going to prepare for Harvey. Fortunately, we know that we didn't get hit by Harvey, but it has allowed the mayor to sort of seem in charge, and that's been important for him on a political level, and also hopefully reassuring to the citizens that he's actually on top of the problems that were uncovered and exposed in the August 5th flooding.
Well, certainly we didn't need that kind of rain here, that's for sure, and thank goodness we did not experience it. But on the state level too, Governor Edwards, I know he's been very present, and then also there are some evacuation centers that are open in the state.
Right, particularly there's called a mega shelter in Alexandria, also a shelter in Lake Charles, Calcasieu Parish, and Cameron Parish. The parish is right there in the southwest corner of Louisiana, where it hit hardest. But we were talking before we came on the air, and I thought you made a really interesting point about all these fears in Louisiana about where it was going to go. And what did you say about it like almost went on the border, right?
You know, we were talking to the leaders in Cameron and Calcasieu, and the day that the storm made landfall in Lake Charles or near Lake Charles, we thought there would be more impact there. There was the wind impact, 45-mile-an-hour winds when it came ashore, but the rain shield did something so unexpected. It stayed all to the west of the center of circulation.
We should, even in New Orleans, have been on the wet side of that storm.
But there was nothing immediately to the east of the center, and they told us it was almost like there was this imaginary magical line
on the border, yeah,
on the state line of Texas and Louisiana that kept the rain on the Texas side. And that's why Beaumont and Port Arthur and still into Houston a little bit, that rain kept falling there, and we saw more widespread devastation. Then there was rain way to the east, but it was over Mobile and Pensacola and ended up in Atlanta, and Mobile got pummeled. It's gotten very little coverage because of everything going on in Texas, but Mobile got rain and rain and rain and rain. Parts of Alabama actually ended up getting more rain than Louisiana did, even though the storm made landfall here.
So the gods or Mother Nature said it's not Louisiana's turn. Louisiana's taken enough already.
Yeah,
just getting back to the thing about the governor, for example, this is the kind of situation when governors can perform best. They have the authority to proclaim things, and they can call out the National Guard, they can call out the state police, and so it's not like having to fight with the legislature all the time. I mean, this is where you really get to be a governor.
And you're absolutely right, Errol, that people will remember from Katrina how Kathleen Blanco, who was a popular governor at that time, her performance was not seen as in being in charge. She seemed overwhelmed by Katrina, and she chose not to run for re-election, and Bobby Jindal learned that lesson. Remember the press conferences or the press events he would have, he would rattle off all this food is here and this communications this, and it seemed like he was in charge.
An hour reading numbers to us, yeah.
Well, I mean, just an amazing situation over there in Houston, and certainly our hearts go out to everyone over there because Houston helped us so much, Hurricane Katrina, and there's such links now between us and Houston.
Well, there's links. I guess the main one is I-10, which is really a link. But you know, we're really different cities too in a lot of different ways. I think what we have in common is the transportation, the east-west transportation, and also the oil industry. But in the oil industry, Houston is more of the engine, and we're a little bit more of the caboose. And I remember during the 70s when the whole redevelopment of Poydras Avenue was going on, and all of a sudden these new buildings are going up like One Shell Square, and people were complaining. They said, we're becoming like another Houston. You know, I mean, this is a Houston type building. We don't want that. And so there's always been a little bit consciousness about Houston at the same time. You know, New Orleans was founded in 1718. Houston was founded in 1836, so New Orleans was like 118 years old when Houston started. And we're a more East Coast, classic European style city, and Houston is more of a Western city, a Western America, where there's lots of space and lots of grazing land and room for cattle and cowboys and everything else. And indeed, one reason it's so big is that it's surrounded by a lot of prairie, and over the years, Texas had fairly liberal annexation laws, so it was able to annex just a lot of prairie after the other and really become a big city. You know, the kind of space you need to build big airports and that sort of thing. New Orleans is limited geographically. I mean, even if we wanted to be a bigger city, I mean, we can only go so far. We got lakes and marshes, and so we have our limitations and we have our differences. But that said, I mean, I think there's still an emotional connection between, because a lot of our people go back and forth. There's a lot of air transit between New Orleans and Houston, so there is a bit of a connection.
And wasn't there a connection that from Katrina, all the people from New Orleans who went there? And it was interesting, the governor the other day, Governor Edwards, talking about how we want to help out Texas because in our hour of need in the aftermath of Katrina, Texas, Houston took our people in, so we want to do the same thing for them.
40,000 New Orleanians went to Houston after Katrina, and many of them stayed and still live there to this day. And so you have that connection, and you do also have the fact that Houston was the most forward, stepped out and said, we will help New Orleans in the aftermath of Katrina. They welcomed New Orleans students in their schools. They literally welcomed New Orleanians into their homes. People in Houston just opened up their homes and let New Orleanians come and stay with them until they could establish a sheltering process. So that's there. That connection is clearly there.
And then along came Rita.
Yeah, yeah, and maybe it followed the New Orleanians. But can you imagine if you went through Katrina here, then you went through Harvey there? But the governor did, in fact, Wednesday night, when it was clear that there was a limited search and rescue need in Louisiana. There was some. Mm-hmm. They were using the boats and the helicopters to get some people out of flooded areas in southwest Louisiana. But he sent the resources over to Texas. And they rescued just Wednesday night 200 people in Texas. Those were all Louisiana troops that went over there and did that. So the governor is trying to return it, and now with opening all the shelters in Louisiana, saying, let the Texans come and stay in Louisiana.
And Houston, Texas, and the folks in Beaumont and Port Arthur, they're going to continue to need our help. Okay, let's go over to Dawn right now and sort of change our focus just a little bit. We have road construction projects going on in different parts of the city. How are they looking?
We have a lot of road construction. A lot of this goes back to what we talked about a while back on this program, where more than 65% of the city's roadways received a grade of D or worse in terms of their ability to be driven on nicely. And the city has $2.4 billion to work on 400 miles of roadway and infrastructure improvements. It's 200 plus projects. One of them is Bourbon Street. That's the one that everybody's heard the most about recently. Repairing the first 8 blocks of Bourbon Street from Canal Street into the French Quarter. The 100 through 400 block should be complete in December. This whole project has just been kind of a nightmare from the beginning. Once they got underground, they found pipes and connections that weren't where they were supposed to be. This hasn't been looked at really far underneath for about 100 years. So it's a mess under there. It's going to cost more. They had rain delays. That part of those first 4 blocks should, however, be complete by December. The next 400 blocks aren't even going to start until May of next year. So
that's been pushed back.
That's been pushed back a little bit. Another big one, the Wisner Bridge at City Park. That bridge, the old bridge, was demolished in late 2015. It was supposed to be finished by now. They ended up with ill-fitting joints in the bridge, and that threw that project off for a little while. The new bridge, larger bridge, 12-foot lanes, including a 12-foot lane for pedestrians and bikes, should be finished by the end of September, the end of this month. So should I say should very carefully. That, in conjunction with the Canal streetcar expansion, makes traveling around City Park just a nightmare right now. You can't get over the Wisner Bridge. You can't get through to come to this television station and other places at Canal Street and City Park Avenue. That project is supposed to be finished where they moved the streetcar and bus barn to November 27th. That one should be finished. There are, if it's not happening in your neighborhood, take a deep breath and wait, because guess what? It's coming soon. There are 21 projects scheduled to start in the month of October, part of Roadwork NOLA. They'll be in Lakeview, in New Orleans East, in Mid-City. There's a project right now on Henry Clay Avenue uptown, and drainage. They're everywhere. So it's
kind of funny that we hear the frustration in your voice, like we heard, though, when people complain that we had more potholes than any other city, and more roads with a grade of D or F than any other city. Well,
just be patient, because some of the roads should be better than a grade of D. We do not have enough money in the city to fix all of the streets. Some of them will be fixed, and many of them will be
Others
fixed
will not be.
within. But this is a long-term project.
But some of
It's-
these things, like the Wisner, it's not like you have to just go around the block. I mean, you really need to go take a really
Yeah.
wide turn around to get around it.
It'll
so.
be 8 years to complete these 400 miles of projects. So just
That's
be
a lot of
happy if your
time.
street gets smoother.
But that Wisner overpass is going to be a lot nicer, though. It
Yes.
sounds like it's going to be much more expanded. All righty, thanks a lot, Don. Tyler,
Yeah.
next year is the 300th anniversary of New Orleans, and I know you know that. What is the city going to be doing about it? Tricentennial celebrations.
Right. Well, and it's actually starting even before next year. It's starting November 11th is the first event. It's going to be at City Park. They're going to take the book fair that they've been doing there and make it much bigger, they hope. And then the Philharmonic Orchestra will perform as well. And but the real events, as you mentioned, will be taking place next year. Although actually there'll be a New Year's Eve celebration as well. But this is. I think Mitch Landrieu, the mayor, is seeing this as kind of the capstone of his 8 years in office. He leaves office on May 7th next year, and he's planning to have a big state dinner in late April. He hopes to have all sorts of dignitaries there. There's supposed to be tall ships. They are raising money for all these events. They've got the money for that event, but they raised almost about $1 million of about the $3 million that they want to ultimately get for the various events.
Is there... Did you want to say
No, I was just saying, the
something?
mayor's just been talking for 7 years about this.
Yeah.
Since he was first elected, he's always talked about rebuilding New Orleans, not as the city she was, but as the city we've always wanted her to be. And he's always said we wanted to do that in time for the
There
tricentennial.
have been multiple projects announced
Started.
for the tricentennial.
Started.
They have started. They won't be finished. The airport, Convention Center Boulevard, the World Trade
Trade
Center
Center.
downtown. All of those projects won't be finished in time, will they?
Well, I bet that he will hold some sort of event before he leaves office. So there'll be maybe two inaugurations or kickoffs for those events.
Is there a commission or something that's overseeing any activities or celebrations that will happen? Just a special tricentennial commission with
Yeah,
the city?
it's of sort of leading citizens, and I should mention one of the other events that they're doing is fixing up Gallier Hall. I got a tour of it about a month ago, and they're fixing the walls and the floors and really gussying it up and making it a nice place again. And that's where, for example, where the big state dinner is supposed to take place.
Okay. So there's not major changes in Gallier Hall. It's just sort of fixing what needed to be repaired, polishing up the floors, that type of thing.
Yeah, it's an
Remember, some
expensive
pieces
project.
fell off Gallier Hall.
Yeah, I would say there were
a
structural
couple
problems where
years
pieces
ago.
of it were
Yeah.
falling on. So.
So
Yeah,
that
they
definitely
fixed
needed to
that,
be
but it's
done.
really the interior that needs a lot of work.
Is there going to be a parade? Do we know if
Well, there's always a
is it-
parade.
Well, I know there's always a parade.
Should be
When
for
is
the
there not a parade?
tricentennial.
Well,
It's
it's going to be
specific
really
parade
easy.
for tricentennial.
It's going to be really easy to adapt Mardi Gras, which would happen anyway, to tricentennial themes, and so I have a feeling some of the crews will do that. But the state dinner. I mean, it's nice. It's bringing in VIPs, but it's not something that the public's going to be getting into.
No, I think the people putting this on would say there's plenty of other events. For example, this event on November the 11th at City Park. There's going to be supposed to be some fireworks events along the river as well. So I think they would say that there is events up and down the line for different kinds of people.
Well, I've got to say also here at WYS, of course, we've been taking a look at the tricentennial for 2.5 years now. Errol and Peggy have put together a wonderful tricentennial book that's going to be released really pretty soon. right?
Yeah. It's what,
about the next
New
month or
Orleans,
so.
the first 300 years.
The
It's
first
got
300 years, it's
essays by like 24 different people. Yeah.
It's going to be, it's going to be a wonderful, certainly a wonderful holiday present, but it's really good. It's going to be a great book. Errol and Peggy certainly do know their New Orleans history. You can count on them. And then, of course, we have our Tricentennial Moments. Peg is going to have a 90-minute documentary coming up in November, so WYS has been doing its part, too, to keep you abreast of Tricentennial.
And got to
what's
mention
going on with the
WWNO
Tricentennial.
has been doing.
WWNO has, and of course the Times-Picayune has, and other media groups too. But of course I had to plug WYS, you know that. Okay, over to Errol. Tigers are in the Dome.
A few years ago, this football game started at the beginning of the football season, and football has changed. This game is actually owned by ESPN, the network. ESPN owns this game and a few of the bowl games, and it's called the Advocare Texas Kickoff Classic. And it was designed to be a neutral field in Texas. It was going to be LSU and Brigham Young, and of course we know why it was moved. There was a little bit of competition for the new site. From the very beginning, the Superdome made the most sense, though. I understand there was some concern about would there be flooding, but when it became apparent that there wouldn't be, some of the BYU people complained, well, this isn't a neutral site in New Orleans, but as Doug Thornton has pointed out, neither would Houston have been either, because it was mostly LSU people that have been going to it. And so we get Houston's football game, but people have to remember that the year of Katrina, the Sugar Bowl wasn't played here that year. It was played in Atlanta. I got to tell you, as a partisan New Orleans, that hurt to see the Sugar Bowl being played in Atlanta.
Saints home games were played in San Antonio.
Yeah, Saints home games played, and then the New Orleans Bowl was played in Lafayette, and so we deserve to have one. And the Superdome is the perfect site. I mean, we're a city that can accommodate the influx of people. It's a great facility. And the curious thing is that the Superdome was the second dome stadium in the world. The first dome stadium was the Astrodome, and the Astrodome was the template. It showed people how to do it. It was unbelievable when you first saw it. The Astrodome still stands right next to the stadium where the game was going to be played. If you see it, it's like a thimble now, and it's no real activity. And so the Superdome was really opened the door for what the Astrodome showed could be done. And in New Orleans, we talk like Texans. We said we were going to do it bigger and better, and kind of with that same kind of brashness. So there was that influence there.
And there's our grand Superdome, still operating and hosting a football game
Still
with the
doing it.
Tigers.
The
All right.
Astrodome has all but been condemned. It's not fit for human occupation right now, but it did get recently a historic designation, so there is an effort now to raise the money to recreate it as something.
Adaptive reuse.
Yeah, they were going to use it as a convention center. That didn't work out so well.
Doesn't that sound very Houstonian? That something that's a building that was built like 1964 gets historic. I mean, that's, in New Orleans, that would be.
We'll give it a few more years on that. Okay, it's time to look ahead. Errol.
Well, Saturday night was going to be Tulane's night. It's opening night at Tulane, and they're playing Grambling at 7 o'clock. And all of a sudden, they got LSU playing up the road, which is sort of a bad break for Tulane. But nevertheless, Tulane season opens Saturday night.
Good night for football fans. Tyler.
Yeah, with Labor Day ending, that will really be kind of, I think, the kickoff for the mayor's race. There really hasn't been a lot going on. The candidates lately have been trying to get endorsements sort of behind the scenes of various important local groups. But I think the race is really going to get going right after Labor Day, and we'll start seeing particularly the TV ads.
All righty. Done.
The game is in the Dome Saturday night, but it is a Texas game. All the profits from the game are going to Harvey Relief. There will be a huge fundraising effort underway there. So if you're going to the game, bring your wallet full for more than just concessions.
Okay.
And the game is just one piece of the puzzle this weekend. The Convention and Visitors Bureau says we're going to have now, when you add the game in with Southern Decadence and the other fairs and festivals that were already on the schedule, 250 to 300,000 visitors to New Orleans for Labor Day weekend, which is unprecedented. And they said that the Landrieu administration has successfully opened the door to the LGBT community, so Southern Decadence may be the biggest ever.
All right, let's hope they have good weather, everyone, this weekend. All right, guys, thanks for being here. Thank you all for joining us, and we'll see you again next week for Informed Sources. Have a good Labor Day.
The firm of Bowen, McLeod & Britt helps both large corporations and small businesses with insurance, risk management, and employee benefits using the same values they've held true for over 30 years: knowledge, vision, accountability, and service. More information is at bmbinc.com.